Last summer, when Liverpool said goodbye to manager Jurgen Klopp, the inevitable question was always going to hang over the football club like a bad smell. Was Arne Slot the right man to replace him? Well, now barely 10 months later, we have our answer. I'm Matt from FourFourTwo, and this is how Liverpool won the Premier League.
I don't think maybe scepticism, but definitely like the unknown factor.
That's Matt Ladson, co-founder and editor of This Is Anfield, and stating the obvious here, a massive Liverpool fan. His in-depth knowledge of Liverpool means he's the perfect person to take us through the club's title-winning season, all the way from his first thoughts on Arne Slot.
Obviously there's like that worry of Dutch managers have not particularly had a strong record in the Premier League. Slot's the first Dutch manager to win the league. There's always that fear of, are we going to struggle like United did after Ferguson, like Arsenal did after Wenger? But then on the other side, like you heard a lot about Slot and what he was about, and there was this hope that he would be like the Paisley to Shankly.
Unknown aside, Slot was bringing his tactical acumen to the table, as seen in his swashbuckling style of play that saw Feyenoord win the 2023 𝗕𝗫𝗍𝗍 title and the 2024 Dutch Cup. It wasn't necessarily Jurgen Klopp's football, but it didn't need to be.
The whole sort of basketball end-to-end approach was something that Slot was keen for him to get away from, and I think 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 mentioned like that the midfielders were often felt as though they were just running back and forth and not too much else and being on the ball. So the approach was even very, very clear that it was going to be different in pre-season. And one of the big things was always due to Jurgen's style and the intensity, not just in playing style but in training as well, and the approach to all that side. We did burn out and we did have a lot of injuries. And then obviously opening game, Ipswich, we learned a little bit about Slot's approach to actually getting the result and not being afraid to make the more difficult decisions. So obviously taking off 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 after 45 minutes, bringing on 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 and making some really good adaptations. And I felt like during that first couple of months, 3 months, that our record in the first half of games was really not that great. But the second half, we were absolutely superb. And it always felt as though it was almost, the first half was like a sort of rehearsal to see how the opponents were setting up. And then at half-time, you'd make the adjustments and win the game.
For those sceptical early on, or believing Slot had just hit a lucky new manager bounce, the early season form laid down a marker that this was something more. Liverpool meant business.
Winning 3-0 at Old Trafford in your third game of the season is always a nice way to sort of start your Liverpool career. Now, obviously, we know that United are pretty awful and could have been in a relegation dogfight if the other three were even worse. But it's still a 3-0 win at Old Trafford, so that was a nice early one to get under the belt.
This Liverpool machine was well oiled for sure, but along with this, it also helped that Mo Salah had an all-timer of a season, breaking records and finding the back of the net left, right and centre. You could argue that the Egyptian putting pen to paper on a new 2-year deal was one of the biggest moments of their campaign. But what exactly was the secret sauce behind his phenomenal statistics?
I think that the change in how the right side is set up, Trent had much more licence to kind of go inside or higher up the pitch under Jurgen, which left Liverpool quite open on that right-hand side. But with having a more stable right fullback, whether that's been Trent or Conor Bradley, has allowed Salah, maybe to do a little bit less of that running back and forwards. And again, the transitional nature of the whole team isn't there. But I think it's also not necessarily just down to the manager, but we need to give credit to Salah himself. He's a player who absolutely dedicates himself to his profession. He's got a cryotherapy chamber in his own house, and he's in the sauna, and he's cold plunging, and he eats exceptionally healthily. He doesn't drink alcohol. He just is a family man. And he's got a burning desire because of what happened at Chelsea the first time. That pushes him on even to this day. I still, to this day, insist that Mo Salah is the most underrated player that's ever played in the Premier League. Maybe this season will go somewhat of a way to actually people realising just how good he is.
Now, you'd think, like a club with Liverpool, millions of fans around the world, media coverage on every kick of the ball, and more content online than you could ever watch, that nobody would really go unsung or unnoticed in the squad. Well, it turns out there are one or two that may just have missed the radar.
You know, the unsung hero for me in terms of like who's your player of the year beyond Salah, Van Dijk, 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏 has been the one that has just been absolute figure of consistency. He's probably helped out 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏, so everybody has sort of noticed, oh, 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏's done absolutely superbly as a six, but I think by having 𝗘𝗏𝗧𝗏 alongside him has made 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏 as good as he's been in terms of exceeding those expectations. 𝗘𝗏𝗧𝗏 played as a holder quite a lot last year under Klopp, so he knows the role. His role now has been a little bit more fluid, and he's been the one that's held the midfield together. And 𝗘𝗏𝗧𝗏's quality on the ball, you know, a future probable vice captain for Liverpool. I think a lot of supporters would see that.
This season, though, hasn't exactly been happy times and good vibes throughout. In fact, on paper, you could argue that Liverpool should have had more. An early FA Cup exit to Plymouth was the definite low point, with a Carabao Cup final defeat to Newcastle and a European exit at the hands of PSG. Not exactly a shock to the footballing world, but still occasions in which Liverpool are used to being involved in, and ones where they'd expect more. Bouncing back is what good teams do, and within that tough period of crashing out of the cup competitions, there was light at the end of the Premier League tunnel, a tunnel that led to the hallowed turf of the Brentford Community Stadium.
The big one where it was like, okay, we are 100% winning this now, was the Brentford away game. Obviously 0-0 going into literally the 90th minute, and then Darwin Núñez scores 2 goals in stoppage time, which is hard to believe now. But that was the one where it's like, okay, we've got that. You know, there was a moment in the last title winning season where Sadio Mane scores a injury time winner away to Aston Villa. I think that was the equivalent moment this season. You know, Núñez scoring those 2 goals at Brentford, and pretty wild celebrations, and that was the moment where I think we knew this is happening.
So now, having won the title at Anfield and with their second Premier League title in the bag, all thoughts turn to the future. A future that will, from next season, likely be without Trent Alexander-Arnold. After 9 years in the first team and having won everything there is to win, it looks like he'll follow Klopp out of the Anfield doors and down a fairly well-known path from Liverpool to Real Madrid, following in the footsteps of Steve McManaman, Xabi Alonso and Michael Owen, among others.
Look, I get it from Trent's personal perspective. He's won it all at Liverpool. He's got an opportunity to go and experience something new and different in life, and you only get one life, you've got to live it. However, the idea that fans should be thanking him and, you know, saying off you go and have a nice time is just, that's not how football works, is it? We all know that. He knows that. He's not daft enough to think it should be any other way. You know, we appreciate everything he's done for the football club, but I'm not going to be blessing him for leaving, that's for sure. There's no bitterness there per se, but once you make that decision to leave Liverpool Football Club, then that's your decision. You know, it's not like the club have sold you. So it is what it is.
So if last summer's question was, can Arne Slot replace Klopp? This summer is surely, can Slot do it again? And are Liverpool on the cusp of another successful era?
Hopefully it goes on in a better vein than Klopp's did, because, you know, Klopp's era was fantastic, but he started from a pretty difficult situation. Arne Slot has come in and inherited a very strong squad, a very strong football club off the pitch, won with basically no new signings the title, and it goes back to that whole hope that he is the Paisley to the Shankly. So yeah, this could and hopefully is the start of a very strong era for Liverpool Football Club.
So that is the Premier League title sewn up for this season. Can Slot do it again next year, or is there going to be another competitor? Leave your comments down below, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
God help the rest of the league when we get a proper real number 9.